And hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of the Minneapolis Northwestern N-Scale monthly video. I'm going to talk about the Union Station project. I'm going to try to get into some of the history of the project and the design of it, how it was developed. Try to give a little background to all the things that went into designing the station and some of the history of the project and where it is now. I'll start by giving you kind of an overall view of some of the early drawings that were developed for the project. Some of the elevations here. You can see the big front part of the station here, and the lower part. We'll zoom into that. You can take a look at it. This is not the original clock tower, but it shows the new clock tower on there. But I tried to work out all the details as I could. In this drawing, here's the entrance, which would be on the side, and all the elevation details on here. You can see the pillars or the columns in the front as we kind of move down the elevation here, and back up a little bit. You can see kind of a side view. This isn't a truly accurate representation, but it gives you an idea of the side views here. This kind of shows where the tracks run underneath the roadway that goes in here. There's the roadway here that goes out in front of the terminal. Here's one of the front entrances, and the concourse that leads out over the tracks, and the two stairwells, elevator shafts. These big X's here were kind of my template for the space needed for each train that went through each track, the clearance. There's the platforms for either two of the platforms here. We'll look for another view here. That's the other side of it, so you can see the left and right ends of it, get an idea what the concourse looks like there as it goes out over the tracks. And a little close-up on the end buildings here, the stairwells. This would be at the end of the concourse. Zoom in for that for you. Here's what they look like. Just kind of a rough plan. This was my original idea. The stairwells here, looking at the end of the concourses. And here's kind of a color view that I did to try to enhance the image a little bit from the side view. Just added some color just to try to get an idea of a little better idea of what things would look like. And it's a side view. Again, it's not entirely accurate representation, but here's the front entrance, the end wall there, and then the concourse off to the right, extending out over the tracks. And here's a rather large overall view of the whole project. Kind of shows the surrounding area, the tracks that run by in front of the station. These red lines are showing the beams that run underneath the platform. You can see some of the station platforms here will be running through underneath there, and there's another platform there. And this big road that comes across will be a big bridge across one side, and then there's a road that goes in front of the station. Another road on the left side of the station. This would be the front of the layout down on the bottom of the picture, and on the top of the picture shows another big road, big street that would run along the backside, and then I've got about an inch or so of space to make some backdrop buildings to finish the scene along the back of the layout. And we'll take a little closer look here. This was my original plan for the station, the floor plan. It's not very detailed. It's pretty rudimentary. I didn't put a lot of work into it, and this was perhaps one of my first mistakes, was not to come up with a really thorough plan. And you can see it's pretty basic, not a lot of detail to it. You see the tracks running underneath there, those blue lines, the tracks running underneath the platforms there where the station rests. These blue lines here showing the tracks underneath. The original clock tower wasn't much more than just a small square. And these are coaches over here, just an outline of coaches that would be on the tracks there to give an idea how big they would be in relation to the plan. Over on the side view here, it's kind of sideways, but shows the side view of the bridge as it would extend out over the tracks. And I tried to show the arches that are in there and the columns that are supporting it. You can see the spaces there for the trains as they would go underneath. So I tried to figure out a good design for the bridge, something plausible, I hope, to show those arches there for the bridge as it spans out over the tracks. And this is kind of a colorized view again. This isn't finished yet. This little road here needs to go through like it does on the other side. So, but this just kind of gives sort of an overall picture of how the layout around the surrounding area of the station. Again, you see a platform 2 right there. It would be platform 2. This is platform 1 near the center of the station. Try to zoom in a little bit. And again, very basic outlines here. The entries. Zoom back a little again. So this was just to help me kind of visualize how everything's laid out. This service road in the front is supposed to go through there, pretend there's no sidewalk there, like it does over here. And this is a one-way road as it goes through, with a large street on the left, another large street on the right, and along the back there'd be another big street. So it kind of surrounds or flanks the station with these large streets. Now the new plan spent a lot more time trying to work in a lot more detail into it. And you can see what I tried to compensate for all my building supplies, building materials, and make sure I drew the plan to match my drawing materials. So you can see the 2 platforms that were drawn in there. The clock tower has got the full big clock tower in there. Zoom into that. And here I drew out all the kind of architectural elements based on the size of the actual building material I was going to use. All those little strips, I measured them out and scaled them up to the right size on the drawings. These are benches that'll eventually fill in the area, kind of a big seating space for all the passengers. You can see the concourses here. I tried to go into details here into the restrooms. My elevators might be a little small in here. You'll see those in a second here. Yeah, I'm not sure if those are really the right size, but again, I'm just kind of going for some plausibility in my design. But you see all the restrooms there, and that's why there's no windows on the lower level, because they don't quite line up with the walls in the restroom, so upper level windows only. And zoom back out again. Little concession stand here. It's going to be sort of a little cook or a little cafeteria kitchen area to serve. So there's no windows along that back wall. It's another change I made in the plan. And I tried to be very careful this time to take into account everything I would need before building the remake, the rebuild. And you can see all the details that were included in the drawings, so I knew just exactly how much space I was going to need for all the components, how thick the walls would be, try to get all the trim pieces in the right spot in the corners and so forth. So I had to really think this out a little bit. And the whole thing is laid out on a 12-foot grid, and you can see these grid lines through the whole plan. Everything's laid out on a 12-foot grid. So I had much better prepared this time for building the model. And again, I spent a little more time working on the elevations, trying to make those a bit more accurate. Again, I used the actual building materials, the styrene strips I was going to use, made sure that I drew those to scale and then used those dimensions to draw my elevations to make sure that I was going to get everything right. So all these little styrene strips were taken into consideration as I drew the elevations for it. And you can see the results here a lot more accurate, and not didn't make a lot of assumptions here, a lot of guesswork. So this helped too to make a more accurate model. And here's another look at the stairwells and the walls at the end of the concourse. Made a little floor plan for each one. You can see the elevator shafts come down to the bottom and the stairwells come down to the bottom floor. So a lot of things taken into consideration this time. And an overall view of the upper deck. This is the plan for the upper deck. You can see the tracks coming up from the helix from down below, the lower deck. They come around and eventually in front of the station here. The station is going to be right in this area. There'll be at a big switch yard, big servicing facility, little harbor scene there, and the tracks will loop around, actually come right back underneath the station again as they make their way around. The station's going to go right in here. You see that one street that'll be on the right side of the station. There's another street that'll be on the left side of the station, and then along the back another big street. And the backdrop, I'll have to build some little backdrop buildings along there, and a coach yard in this area, some other buildings I'm going to have to come up with to scratch build. And we'll take a closer look at that little spot right there where the station is going in. So there'll be 4 tracks coming in to the station. This is a big street behind the station. The station's going to go right in here. The platform is right there for one, and another platform will be right there. And the street in front of the station, and again 2 streets that'll flank either side of the station. So I'll give you an idea where this is going to go on the upper deck. Well, this started out, construction began in August of 2017, and I thought I was on the right track. Turned out my initial approach led to a lot of problems. I thought the best thing to do would be to build up these walls completely with all the details, all the finished parts on them, and that was mistake number 1. Because it turned out later when I did the rebuild, I did all the walls and left all the details off. So all the walls were just flat, and made it a lot easier to put the walls together when it came to the corner joints, nice easy butt joints, instead of trying to make these built-up walls fit together, because it was not working well. So that was my first mistake here. But the methods for building just the first 2 layers of the walls were pretty much the same. It's pretty much throughout the project there were 2 layers of styrene, and mainly that was for all the windows that were around the most of the walls there. So most of the windows have kind of an inset look to them. And I got pretty well along with the south wing of the smaller portion, and decided to do as much work as I could on that. And then I kind of took a break for a while, and I didn't get back to it for quite a long time, and the project sort of sat idle for a while. But I tried some light tests with the early work. And for a while I didn't have much more than just the south wing and 1 concourse that I was putting together. I tried some interior details, a little cardstock insert. Also played around with some stairwells, wondering should I detail the stairwells, and I made one prototype that turned out to be too small. I had to redesign the prototype, make everything a little bit bigger. And when I resumed work in 2018, I started making the concrete beams for the platform that supports the station. The whole platform is suspended on some beams. Started filling in the base underneath, trying to work on the platforms and the track work. Design that in there, see how all those components would come together. And kept working on this is the underside of the platform. And that's the top side of the platform. And then all the I-beams that were used to support the platform. I started playing with some of the little details here, experimenting with some railings that will eventually go along around the platform, and started working up the elevator shaft stairwells, trying to get those together. You can see lots of mess going on here with all the different things I was trying to do. These stairwells didn't really work out very well. Again, another mistake was to try to make separate components here, and later in the rebuild it was a lot easier just to kind of integrate everything into one big structure, and that all came together much better. You can see here they don't quite all come together very nicely, and so it was a little clumsy. Didn't quite turn out as well as I would have liked. And here I'm putting together the walls on the north wing, and started working on some roof panels. Gonna rough those out. I started to really see how this was going to come together. There's walls for the concourses, two concourses, and got those attached. Now, one of the big problems I had in the back of this concourse with these back walls was I thought I had the concourses reversed. Turned out I had them right, but I didn't figure that out until I took them apart, glued them back on, and then realized I had it right to begin with and glued them back on. So it was a mess. It really wonkied up that back wall. But I kept going here. I hadn't reached the point where of deciding to start over again, so I was still working, and I thought maybe I could get all the pieces to come together. But eventually there were just too many things that I just didn't like about the construction and the results, and more and more I was having second thoughts about my initial approach to this. So I did some light tests, and lighting was a bit of a problem because I had to do all the pieces were all linked together and tied together, and so lighting was all integrated into the roof of the model, and it was just kind of clumsy and messy, and I just didn't quite like the way it was working out. So work began on the clock tower, and this was really the part of the project that I learned really what was the right way to do this project. The clock tower, the four walls initially came together. You see this one's got some detail on it, but I actually started over on that clock tower with just plain flat walls, and they went together very nicely with just the floor flat walls. And then I came back in with the detail and the trim pieces, and the corners turned out so nice. Then that was about that point that I realized I'd been approaching this whole project incorrectly, and So the clock tower, just that small part was where I learned, okay, this is what I should have done. Just make the flat walls and then add the details later. Also, this was the first one that had some experimental painting on it. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to paint this thing, and that turned out using some pan pastel chalks and just kind of brushing them on with a little bit of water to help kind of spread out the color. And that gave me the color I was looking for. It gives it a nice weathered, kind of antique-y look to it. Another thing about the clock tower was that the enlarged version was an afterthought, so I had to figure out a way to make it look right in the back of the station where I already had the gable in the back here. So in the remake, that gable is not in there, so it's a smooth wall in the back of the station. So that was another plan or change in the plans that made things easier for construction. And as I mentioned earlier, the concourses got mixed up in the back, and I ended up taking them apart and gluing them back on and then taking them apart again. And that really led to some pretty messy work in the back wall there, and the joints never did come back together again very well. So another mistake that I had to try to overlook, but it was one more of a growing list of complaints against my work here that I just didn't like. So more things learned, more lessons learned that were applied to the rebuild. And here the clock tower is going in, trying to clamp it into the rest of the main structure. And at this point I had a lot of painting done, a lot of detail work done. And it was looking okay, but again, I was just growing more and more dissatisfied with the project. But I kept working at it, thinking maybe I could salvage all my work here. Finally got the front end with all the columns and pillars in there, and that was about the first time I really was able to see what this was going to look like. Roof panels on the rebuild was another big design change or construction change. Originally I thought I would access this model from underneath, and that proved to be very problematic because it was going to be difficult to get it to sit flat on the platform, and again, it was a backward decision. And then the rebuild, I used a base for the floor and glued all the walls to that base, so that solved lots of problems right off the bat. And it finally came time to try to fix the roof here. I had to come up with lots of little patches and things, and the roof panels didn't quite come together very well. I had to do lots of patching here, and oh boy, lots of clamping, just trying to glue the panels right onto the top of the building. And this had a lot of trouble here too, because the roof line wasn't even all around the model. The wall lines were crooked, and led to a lot of problems. Had a lot of light leaks and so forth. So, but again, this is a big mistake. Here's some little strips that I used for the details on the roof. But the roof panels are removable on the new model, and it makes it a lot easier. All the lights and things are all incorporated in the roof panels, and so it's much easier to work with and much better results. And I decided to try to play around a little bit with the camera and some just some little details, trying to get an idea of what things would look like once I ever did get this darn thing finished. And I was just curious to kind of try to dress it up just a little bit with some minor details, a couple of little vehicles and some figures, and a sample of the railing that I'd been making. So I was pleased with the way those things came out, and they looked pretty nice and added some nice little character to the building, to the whole scene. Well, finally came time to try to glue the north wing to the south wing, and this is where the whole thing just kind of came off the rails. It was such a mess. This was perhaps the biggest mistake, was trying to build these two components and then try to blend them together. The angle came out wrong. They would not, once they were glued together, they wouldn't, the whole project was wobbly on a flat surface. It wouldn't sit flat. And it took a lot of work just to try to put these two halves together, and building the whole model on a base and then do the whole thing as one piece, get the angles right and all the joints right. That made a big difference. So this is where things just kind of went off the rails for me, and it was at this point I decided to just start over. Scaled them up full size.
What? Is he starting over? Huh?
I think that's what he said.
He's starting over? Huh?
Oh, yeah, I'm starting over.
Huh?
And by the way, the former project manager has been fired.
Oh, well, but, well, I, well,
Fired.
And so, armed with lessons learned from the first attempt, I started over. And many of the changes were not necessarily in design, but in the construction methods. And the big change, first change, was to put the main terminal, the north and south wings, all on one piece on a base, and the walls all came together very nicely. Had all the angles right. It was flat on the table, and all the walls were built separately with no details. They were just the windows. It was about as detailed as I got. You can see here there's no detail on any of these walls. Stairwells were all put together into one big component. No details. It made everything fit together nicely. All nice square butt joints that were nice and easy to put together. It didn't have to fiddle with trying to make any beveled joints like I tried, or fooling around with things that were too big or didn't fit. So the rebuild got together pretty quick, because I had learned some skills and procedures from the previous build, and it didn't take long to knock out all these walls. And once I had major components pretty well finished, then I put on the details. You can see some of the stairwells had some details on them. Here's an overall kind of look again of all the components put together. Just kind of fiddling with the camera, trying to get some perspective from the rails to see what things would look like. So just having a little fun with the camera. And the idea was separate roof panels really made the roof a lot easier to put together. You notice too, the gables were not part of the walls, they're part of the roof panels. You notice all the walls are flat across the top. There are no gables on them. Those are all incorporated into the roof panels. Another change that made things much easier to deal with. And so here we are, present day this month. I put everything together onto the platform here. You can see the old station there next to the new one, and just put everything up on the platform, put the whole project together just to kind of review where we're at. So hoping to maybe get some more work done on this soon. I've been trying to work on the lower deck and finish the lower deck so I can get started on the upper deck where this project will be. So it's kind of a cat and mouse. Either I play with this and delay the upper deck, or I work on the lower deck and delay this project. So kind of balance my projects a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed the overview on this and a little history on the project. And we'll see you next time on the Minneapolis Northwestern N-Scale Monthly Video Journal. So hope you enjoyed it, and Happy New Year again to everybody. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.